Hey guys, in our last video we looked at the Virginia colony and how the plantation economy and slavery grew there. What we're going to be looking at in today's slideshow is other colonies in the American South that share important similarities with the Virginia colony. With the success of the Virginia colony, other people over in England started thinking that it might also be a good idea to set up a colony in the American South based on a similar economic model. And these other colonies were Maryland, the Carolinas, and Georgia. And so the important traits that they share with Virginia are that they are primarily plantation economies that have slavery, and both of these result in a very unequal society. So the first Southern colony to be founded after Virginia is Maryland. Maryland is founded in 1637, which is 31 years after the Jamestown colony. Like Virginia, its main crop is tobacco. Something that distinguishes Maryland from Virginia, though, is its unusual religious toleration. So Maryland was founded by English Catholics to escape persecution that was going on in England. And so if you remember the whole debacle with Henry VIII, there was a split in England between the Catholics and Protestants. And now what is going on is the Protestants, who are the majority in England, are persecuting English Catholics. So a lot of the English Catholics want to come over into America, and they do that in Maryland. And so in Maryland, they passed this thing called the Act of Toleration, which makes it so that anybody who is a Christian will have equal rights there. This is a big step towards religious freedom as we know it today. But it still shows that it's almost 400 years old, because while it does give equal rights to Christians, it also makes it necessary to give the death penalty to anybody who claims to be a Jew or an atheist. So they're not quite there yet. The next colony to be founded was Carolina. Just Carolina, not North Carolina or South Carolina. It gets split up later. But this happens in 1670. And basically the king just gives a giant chunk of land to 7 of his buddies, who then split it up however they want. The foundation of the Carolina economy is also agriculture. In the north, up where we live, tobacco is the main crop, grown in a plantation just like in Maryland. In the south, rice and indigo are the main crops. And we all know what rice is. It's grown in huge swampy plantations down by the coast. And indigo is a special plant that you can make a dye out of, like this deep bluish purple dye. And this is also grown in huge plantations. Another aspect of the Carolinian economy is trade. And Charleston, South Carolina, becomes the biggest port in the South. It ships out most of the stuff that is grown, all the tobacco and rice and indigo, and it also becomes an important place where slaves are brought in and sold. The Charleston slave market was the largest slave market in America. Yes, and so obviously, because of this thriving plantation economy, millions of slaves are brought in over time to work in the tobacco fields and in the rice and indigo plantations. Georgia is the last colony to be founded in the South, and it's a little bit different from the other ones. It's founded way later, almost 100 years after Maryland. And the main reason that it's founded is not to grow crops, but to serve as a buffer zone between Spanish Florida and English Carolina. So kind of protecting the more valuable colonies further north. To populate Georgia, they agreed to send convicted English criminals over from England into Georgia. And these convicts, if they agree to go, basically get a second chance. They can get a little bit of land, start a farm, and live in Georgia. So Georgia doesn't develop a plantation economy as quickly as the other states, First of all, because slavery was illegal for 50 years, and you can't really run a plantation without importing slaves on a large scale. But later on, about 50 years after Georgia is founded, slavery is made legal, and then it begins to spread there, just as it had spread in the other colonies. And so those are the different southern colonies. There's Virginia, which we talked about last time, and then there's Maryland, the Carolinas, and Georgia. And all of these colonies have important similarities, and it's useful to think about them as a larger group. First of all, they are all characterized by the plantation economy. And remember, this is where huge plantations, which are basically just enormous farms, produce a cash crop. That is, they produce something not to be used there, but to be sold somewhere else for a profit. The plantation economy results in an extremely unequal society. Most of the land in these colonies is controlled by a few wealthy plantation owners. So the guys who actually own the land and own the plantations control a large amount of the territory in these colonies, and they become extremely wealthy. Most non-slaves live as poor farmers, and they grow mostly food rather than cash crops. And these non-slaves who work on small farms might have one slave or two slaves, but it was very rare for them to have any at all. Most of the slaves were owned by the wealthy plantation owners. And then, of course, there were the huge number of slaves who were imported for labor on the plantations, and they had no rights and basically no chance of improving their position in Southern society. And so what you get is this kind of pyramid shape with the plantation owners on the top, a very small number of them, then small numbers underneath them, and then the largest group were the slaves that worked on the plantations at the bottom of the social structure. No, there's only one key term for today, the act of toleration. So make sure you remember that. And try to remember the big picture ideas. What is it that makes all of the southern states, or colonies rather, similar? What are they doing to support themselves? What is their society like? That's the sort of big picture stuff that I really want you to pay attention to. Anyway, that's all for tonight. See ya.